because the story with the swamps starts with a swamp somewhere in Germany that some people between the two world wars decided they want to drain, because they believed that they could tame the nature, and it was a sort of inner imperialism, yeah, that you can be the conqueror of nature and an imperialist of nature, and the idea that you can conquer nature and that you can conquer a swamp is also the idea that you can conquer all of the imaginative stuff that people throughout like hundreds of years like threw inside the swamp, like you throw like garbage, yeah. So they threw inside the swamps all of that stuff that they were afraid of. They threw demons inside, and they threw how do you call it? They threw vampires inside, and they threw dragons inside, and they threw inside all of that stuff. They threw inside that they were afraid of, and then of course they came to a swamp and they saw a swamp and they were terribly afraid of the swamp because generations and generations people threw into the swamp all this stuff. But I think the Ober metaphor of a swamp for a very long time and has always been the woman. Cannot understand, it's a swamp, it's not land, it's not water. Where does it start? Where does it end? It's unreliable. I think the swamp for very, very many years was by masculine chauvinist society depicted as something feminine. I think this is why there is the American slang for vagina is bush. So I think all of that stuff was thrown into a swamp, and then after that stuff was thrown into a swamp, they wanted to kill it. And so they tried to kill it. Now the swamp is dry. The swamp doesn't exist there anymore. But of course, all of the stuff that people were afraid of, the demons, the dragons, the eating stuff, the dangerous fish, it still exists. So they wanted to kill their own demons by drying the landscape, but it doesn't really work.
I mean, there's a third layer to the swamp, and that is that it's the dangerous Orient. Mm-hmm. So it's also, you're working on the level of imagination, but a museum doesn't work without imagination. So it's a reality, but it's a reality that you can only tackle with a language that allows all these illusions. And then you found a very interesting little detail that Friedrich Wolf, the eminent German communist writer, wrote a drama about drying the swamp, and that this drama was played in Tel Aviv in a theater about 1940, and the same architect who later built Betusishkin did the stage design for this anti-swamp drama on the Tel Aviv stage. So you could even follow the metaphor on a physical trace, even if it was just in the air. So that led you, into the domain of fairy tales and legends, in a way. There is another difficult territory, and that is who can talk about this with whom. And you were maybe shy to talk with other fellow kibbutzniks, but at least also you tried to talk to descendants from the community of Hunin. who are still living in Berlin, and another idea on Google Hunin, and you will run into a football club in Berlin of descendants from that village. And they have their own very active community life in Berlin. When you lived in Berlin for 2 years, I mean, was part of the plan to go to Berlin already to try to find descendants from Hunin, or was that just out of chance?
No, no. In fact, it was the other way around. When I went to live in Berlin with my partner, we rented an apartment by chance in one street in Berlin, in one area of Berlin, where there's a very large population of Palestinians living there. So this is where we lived, and I was then 31 or 32. I was already like quite a political person. I was already quite educated. But somehow I didn't really understand that there is like an issue called Palestinian refugees. I just didn't know that, and it's quite strange to think of, because I had the privilege and the luck to go to a good school and to university, and I was a political person. But somehow I didn't know that, and I went around in Berlin in those areas, and I saw like these shops, you know, selling whatever, and they had like and I saw a map of what I recognized as Israel, but all of the map was somehow painted in the colors of the Palestinian flag, and I somehow I had no idea that there are people in the world that think like that, and so I started to get curious about, like, okay, there's something here that I just didn't understand, yeah, in the whole in my story, in the way that I try to make sense of the world for myself. And in fact, this was then when I re-remembered the rumor that Gimel told me about the stones. This is when it somehow was reactivated in my mind, and and then I came back to Israel, where I wrote the book. So I didn't try to find the Hunin community in Berlin. I wrote to them. There was one or two persons who answered me. It's somehow described in the book, but it wasn't very fruitful. I think this is mainly, at least in Hebrew, this is mainly a book written. This is mainly a book written from Israeli to Israelis. Yeah. Okay. You know, like, we have something to talk about here. Yeah. So there was about this. There was one thing what was important for me to say. It's a book between an Israeli to Israeli, saying, "Look,
don't say that too loud. There are people here.
Yeah,
quiet."
but I was wondering. So I was wondering what can this book do in German? Yeah. I mean, I think every book exists in a context, yeah? Language, a certain language is a context. Language has a political context. And if you make an act of translation, basically you change the political, social, lingual context in which a text exists. And so basically the text is not the same text anymore, because the reading of it, the arena in which it is read, is like totally altered. So I think all of the things that I'm saying to you now, and I have a feeling that there are things, I have a feeling that I'm telling you what the Hebrew book is about. Yeah? But I don't know what is the German book about. I mean, you have to read it. All of you. No, really. I mean, I don't know what the book, because I'm not a German reader, and so I don't know what the act of translation did to that book, and I'm really also not the person that could answer this question. Yeah?
To our I mean, there's one thing that is universal about the book, and that is that you experiment with quite a lot of different languages, and some of it is the language, let's say, a German-Jewish language, some is a German language, some is English. We come later to Shakespeare. And some of the quotes in the book that you translated into Hebrew, the translator just found in the original German book and used the original German, so sometimes the translator made a shortcut. I would love to listen now to one short quote from the book from Hubert, which leads us back for a short moment into the world of the archives, but also to the world of drama, because part of it is a dialogue. And then we just get an impression of one of the many literary experiments in the book, and we get to a little bit of Shakespeare later on.